Hi, I'm Gary Malevsky, the publisher of Cyber Defense Magazine. Welcome back to another episode of Cyber Defense TV. I have a very special guest today sitting in the hot seat, none other than the CEO of DB Networks, Brett Helm. Brett, welcome.
Thank you.
So tell us about DB Networks. What do you do and how do you protect databases?
Well, we started and we founded the company originally with a concept as one of the original security companies to do artificial intelligence and apply that specifically to database data loss. And so what we do is what few companies do, not only from an AI and machine learning perspective, but also from protecting data where the data exists as opposed to in the perimeter where people are just trying to lock the front door.
So we hear about breaches. The Verizon report, privacyrights.org, we hear about 10 billion records stolen so far. And they're saying that all these records that are stolen, they're stolen out of databases. And yet most people are thinking, as you say, at the front door, it's the phishing attacks, it's the malicious insiders. There's so many issues, but they're not looking at the database. Tell us how you take a unique approach to solving this big problem.
Well, first of all, when you think about it, old story that we all know about, which is actually from the 1800s, when they asked a robber, well, why do you rob banks? And his answer, of course, was, well, that's where the money is.
Good old Willie Sutton.
Of course, and so the same thing applies here. Why are people attacking databases? Well, that's where all the sensitive information, the content is. The content that can be turned into money, and so we specifically focus all of our attention there. And so when you think about the databases, it's a very difficult problem. And so the customers, the easy approach would be to lock the front door. Why don't I buy a new firewall? Why don't I have a new perimeter defense? And if it worked, it would be great, but it doesn't work. Attackers get in, it's completely open and available to get through that perimeter. And once attackers get through that perimeter, they often move laterally, they find the content. And when you hear about the content and the breaches, you hear about these ridiculous stories about how it took 300, they've been in there for 300 days. And the industry's happy with this number going from 300 days to 220 days. That's ridiculous. And so what we do, which is very unique, is we, as I said earlier, we apply artificial intelligence and machine learning specifically to databases, so we're able to detect normal from abnormal behavior. And what we do, which is so unique, is we're able to really find the predictors of this data loss before the data loss occurs. And while it sounds magical, it's not magical. We look for malicious intent. When you think about DLP, it's about, and DLP's been around for 15 years, they're looking at the content as it leaves the building. Let's look at this content as it leaves the building. Well, as I suggested earlier, professional hackers do things to get in, move laterally, obfuscate the information before it leaves, oftentimes encrypting it. It can't be seen. So we've taken the unique approach of not only looking at the data as it's leaving, but looking at the request. And when you look at the request, you can find that malicious intent. You cannot hide behavior. You can lie to people, but you can't hide behavior. So we look at things, and so when you look at information, whether it be failed logins, whether you look at people looking at records that they've never seen before, whether they're reading records when in fact they were writing records, when you look at all of these different aspects of databases, we can see malicious intent before the breach occurs, let alone finding it 300 days because of an audit, because we got called by a agency or a bank informing us that something's been wrong. And so that's the unique approach we take.
What kind of pressures are there on folks, let's say around the globe? In the US we have HIPAA and there's others. What kind of pressures are we seeing around the world that might require a system like yours?
Well, first of all, the world is divided differently. And so in the United States we have personal information that is like gold. You have people like Facebook and Google who treat that information and collect it, and it's gold. They loved it. In Europe, personal data is looked upon kind of as kryptonite because there's regulation already around the protection of EU citizens and their personal data. And so what we're finding is in Europe, they take it very seriously. And with the regulation like GDPR out there, we're critical. It's a game changer because when you look at the regulation, it's not only for unstructured data like file systems, but it's for structured data. And it's forcing the customers to do the right thing. Now, your question was about global personal data. We believe that the European GDPR is going to bleed over into the US. It's going to, because we have, as you can see from the Senate hearings with Facebook and others, and the breaches like OPM, you're seeing that personal data loss, and it's becoming serious, and we're going to see that bleed over to the United States. How fast, we don't know, but we have it occurring right now in Europe.
So when you see the value of a company like Facebook drop in billions dramatically, is that saying that, and what you've talked about with GDPR, that our privacy, the value of a human being's personal information, is actually becoming more valuable than ever?
It is, and that's why they're collecting US. Now the question is what kind of regulation in the United States is going to go into effect to protect that personal data? And we believe, like in Europe, you're going to want to contain it, you're going to want to minimize where it exists, you want to protect it, and you want to continuously monitor it. And much of that data is not only in file systems, but it's in structured data, databases, relational databases, NoSQL databases, and that's where we come into effect.
So I really want to thank you. I appreciate this interview. It's probably the most innovative company I've heard about in cybersecurity because it's where the data is. And every day we hear about another breach.
Right.
I haven't heard about any company so far like DB Networks.
Thank you.
So I think you're onto something big. And I just want to tell our viewers to visit dbnetworks.com and stay tuned again next time for another wonderful episode of Cyber Defense TV.